Okay, so now we'll start one more act, very important act. Often it is asked in prelims and mains both. In prelims they will ask about the provisions, mains they will ask about the provisions and analysis. Okay. Okay. So the act name is FRA Act, that is Forest Rights Act of 2006. Full form, the Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers. Recognition of Forest Rights Act of 2006. It means it will recognize the rights, the land rights of the forest dwellers. Forest dwellers means those who stay there. But there is a condition, like 75 years you need to stay there. Okay, all these conditions we'll study. So the government will recognize the rights, the land rights of the forest dwellers. In particular the scheduled tribes. The scheduled tribes and the traditional forest dwellers, recognition of Forest Rights Act 2006. So it was a very much kind of a landmark act in that point of time, because the government gave a legal recognition to the rights of forest dwellers. Legal recognition. Okay? Now, nodal agency. This act, the nodal agency of this act is Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Remember, Ministry of Tribal Affairs. It deals with the rights of forest dwelling communities over land and other resources. Over land, over the land. Unka land rehta hai, right? Unka land and other resources. The act gives legal recognition to the rights of the traditional forest dwelling communities, which I said now. This act gives a legal recognition to the forest dwelling, to the rights of the forest dwelling communities. Now, this identifies 4 types of rights in this act. 4 types of rights. First is title rights. ठीक है? Title rights क्या है? See, title rights, use rights, relief and developmental rights, and forest management rights. So one by one we will cover. ठीक है? First is title rights. Title rights, it gives the forest dwelling scheduled tribes. Okay, it gives the forest dwelling scheduled tribes and other forest dwellers the right to ownership. Right to ownership to land farmed by tribals or forest dwellers subject to maximum of 4 hectares. So simply in one line you can write the title rights is ownership to land rights, okay, subject to maximum of 4 hectares. Short mein you have to remember. Okay. Next, ownership is only for land that is actually being cultivated. That kind of land which is actually being cultivated by the concerned family, and no new lands will be granted. जो कि cultivation में चल रहा है, उसी का ownership rights you will get. ठीक है? Maximum limit of recognizing the rights on the forest land is obviously 4 hectares. ठीक है? Now use rights. In use rights, now obviously when they have a land, they'll use it, right? They'll use it for producing something. So here comes another definition or a term which we have already discussed, that is the minor forest produce. The rights of the dwellers extend to extracting minor forest produce. So for the first time in India, in a law, this term was used, minor forest produce. Now only forest produce was already defined where? In the Indian Forest Act of 1927. Okay, all those timber. Minor forest produce is non-timber. ठीक है? Okay. So this law in a way gives the legal recognition to the minor forest produce. Okay, they have a land, it is recognized. Now what to use for minor forest produce, that is also given in the law. Next, relief and developmental rights. To rehabilitation in case of illegal eviction or forced displacement and to basic amenities subject to restrictions. It means suppose the forest is being diverted for some public purpose kind of thing. Government wants that area to make a road or something, and their tribals are staying. So rehabilitation has to be done. If rehabilitation is not done, they can go to court because law is there. Understand? Tribals face a problem, right? So rehabilitation and developmental rights also there in this law. Next is forest management rights. It includes right to protect, regenerate or conserve or manage any community forest resource which they have been traditionally protecting and conserving for sustainable use. So forest को manage करना भी उनका एक right है because they have been doing it since long time. Okay, lot of movies आती है ना, अभी कांतारा मूवी एक आई थी. Okay, so forest को conserve करना उनका कहीं ना कहीं they have that right. So that rights of conserving or managing forest is also recognized through law in Forest Rights Act of 2006. So it is a landmark act, right? Because till 2006 all these things were not there in any law. There are other laws, Wildlife Protection Act है, Biodiversity Act है, Environment Protection Act है, Forest Conservation Act 1980 which we'll cover in the next class. Acts were there, but this particular category which deals with the rights of those tribals staying in forests, that was not recognized till 2006. So it became a very landmark act. Clear? Now, who can claim these rights? Not everyone. Some conditions will be there. ये जो rights मिला है tribals को, who can claim? Members or community of the scheduled tribes who primarily reside in and who depend on the forest for livelihood needs. Basically those who stay there, residing means staying there, and their livelihood depends on the produce which they do on that land, forest produce. So यहाँ पे mostly it is minor forest produce के ऊपर काम होता है. Okay? It can also be claimed by any member or community who has for at least 3 generations, मतलब minimum 75 years, at least 3 generations, 75 years prior to the 13th day of December 2005. 2006 से हुआ. So they are saying the persons who are staying at least for 3 generations, they can also claim. Primarily resided in forest land for livelihood needs. Clear? पहले तो ये है 75 years, okay, those who depend on that. Okay. Now, the Gram Sabha is the authority to initiate the process for determining the nature and extent of individual forest rights or community forest rights. Now here too, individual right is also recognized, community forest rights is also recognized. Community forest rights means anyone who is sharing, they're sharing the particular land. So Gram Sabha is the authority. Claim करने के लिए who will start the process? There should be a process, right? So Gram Sabha has been given. Gram Sabha we study in polity, पंचायती राज में पढ़ते हैं. तो ग्राम सभा को ऑथोरिटी मिला है क्या? टू इनिशिएट द प्रोसेस फॉर डिटरमिनिंग कि कितना वो जो राइट्स है कितना हो सकता है, द नेचर एंड एक्सटेंट ऑफ द इंडिविजुअल फॉरेस्ट राइट्स और द कम्युनिटी फॉरेस्ट राइट्स. क्लियर? नाउ व्हाट इज द प्रोसेस? द प्रोसेस इज द ग्राम सभा, दैट इज नथिंग बट द विलेज असेंबली. ग्राम सभा will initially pass a resolution. The Gram Sabha will initially pass a resolution recommending whose rights to which resources should be recognized. So Gram Sabha क्या करेगा? पहले it will initiate a resolution pass करेगा. It will initiate the process where recommend, the word is recommend कि whose rights to which resources, इसका राइट है या उसका राइट है, कौन सा रिसोर्सेस के ऊपर, ऑल दिस थिंग्स ही विल रिकमेंड. ओके, नाउ दिस रिजोल्यूशन इज देन स्क्रीन्ड. ठीक है, स्क्रीन्ड मीन्स कहीं ना कहीं इट इज रिव्यू, स्क्रीन्ड एंड अप्रूव्ड एट द लेवल ऑफ सब डिविजन और तालुका लेवल पे. एंड subsequently at the 2 लेवल पे काम होता है. डिस्ट्रिक्ट लेवल इज द फाइनल डिसीजन कहां पे होता है? डिस्ट्रिक्ट लेवल, स्टेट लेवल तक नहीं जाता है. गॉट इट? क्वेश्चंस विल बी आस्क्ड फ्रॉम हियर आल्सो, प्रीलिम्स क्वेश्चंस. Screen and approved at the level of subdivision of the taluka level, and subsequently approved final will be taken at the district level. Clear? ठीक है. Now the screening committee रहता है, somebody will screen, right? Somebody will review. Screening committee जो रहता है, the screening committee consists of 3 government officials, forest department, revenue department and tribal welfare department से 3 government officials and 3 elected members of the local body at that level. Or these committees also hear appeals. Suppose district level ने कुछ बोल दिया है verdict, you are not okay with it, you can appeal to the same level. This level will also, these committees will also hear appeals. ठीक है? 3 government रहेंगे, 3 elected रहेंगे. You have to remember all this for prelims. 3 government officials and 3 elected members of the local body. Okay, understood? These are all factual data. This is one of the most favorite topic of UPSC prelims. Every year also they will ask, but questions will be different, but topic will be the same, FRA. Okay. Finally, the land recognized under the act cannot be sold or transferred. अगर वो land recognized हो गया, if they approve it, it cannot be sold, it cannot be transferred. ठीक है? Now, very important, critical wildlife habitats. What is critical wildlife habitats? Very important. एग्जाम पे 2018-19 पे एक बार पूछा जा चुका है. It may be asked again because it is always a evergreen topic. Critical wildlife habitats. Now, this critical wildlife habitats, it is also defined under same act, FRA Act. FRA Act के अंदर it is defined. Now, what is this? We'll know. Okay, the definition of critical wildlife habitats is incorporated in the FRA Act. First thing is it is defined in a statute, that is FRA Act. ठीक है? Now, remember wildlife term है, that does not mean it is under the Wildlife Protection Act. Wildlife Protection Act में नहीं है. We have already covered Wildlife Protection Act. Okay. These are the areas within the protected areas. Now, what are critical wildlife habitats? Critical wildlife habitats. So, it is very self-explanatory. So, first of all, these are areas within, term is within the protected areas. Protected areas is what? National park, wildlife sanctuaries, and protected areas are under Wildlife Protection Act 1972. ठीक है? So these are the areas within the protected areas, within, not outside, which are to be kept as inviolate for the purpose of wildlife conservation. Inviolate means what? Nobody can enter, nobody can violate anything. अलग से रखते हैं उसको. But that is within the national park, not outside. Outside the national park वो हो जाता है eco sensitive zone. That is different. Eco sensitive zone are invoked under Environment Protection Act of 1986. This is within the national park. Okay. Now to be kept as inviolate. But what is the reason? What is the parameter? It is based on scientific and objective criteria. अपना अपना साइंटिफिक और ऑब्जेक्टिव क्राइटेरिया के हिसाब से द गवर्नमेंट विल डिक्लेयर दिस पर्टिकुलर एरिया विद इन द नेशनल पार्क और वाइल्ड लाइफ सेंचुरी टू बी क्रिटिकल वाइल्ड लाइफ हैबिटेट्स. नाउ द टर्म इज मीन्स नोबडी कैन एंटर. सो इट मेक्स वेरी क्लियर कि क्रिटिकल वाइल्ड लाइफ हैबिटेट्स में absolutely it is free of human presence. एब्सोल्युटली फ्री ऑफ ह्यूमन प्रेजेंस. ह्यूमन वहाँ पे रह नहीं सकते. ह्यूमन प्रेजेंस इज नॉट देयर इन क्रिटिकल वाइल्ड लाइफ हैबिटेट्स. ठीक है. नाउ सी द आयरनी. ऑन वन साइड it is saying कि critical wildlife habitats will not have human presence. Suppose वहाँ पे एक ट्राइबल 75 ईयर से रहता है, तो the same act recognizes the rights of tribals and the same act says critical wildlife habitat में कोई नहीं जा सकता. क्या हो रहा है? क्लैश हो रहा है नहीं? So this is the problem. The above definition makes it clear that critical wildlife habitats are absolutely free of human presence, but the same FRA Act duly recognizes the traditional rights of forest dwellers. It may be possible that a forest dweller may be staying in one area, and today if the government says that it is critically wildlife habitat, so your right is gone, right? You can't enter. So there is a ambiguity है. Understanding? Now this question came in prelims before. Critical wildlife habitats, who declares it? It is declared by the central government after a process of consultation by expert committees. Lekin who will initiate it? State government shall initiate the process for notification of a critical wildlife habitat by submitting an application on a case-to-case basis to the Ministry of Environment. To the Ministry of Environment under intimidation to the nodal agency of the said act. So who will initiate first? I am asking one by one. Who will initiate? State government will initiate through an application. To whom? सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट. ठीक है. मतलब यहाँ पे सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट कौन है? मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एनवायरमेंट है. लेकिन दे विल ऑल्सो इंटिमिडेट, नॉट इंटिमिडेट, ऑल्सो इंटिमेट टू हुम? मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ ट्राइबल अफेयर्स, बिकॉज FRA एक्ट कम्स अंडर मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ ट्राइबल अफेयर्स. सो बी केयरफुल विद द वर्ड्स. इंटिमेट करेंगे ट्राइबल अफेयर को, एप्लीकेशन विल गो डायरेक्टली टू द मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एनवायरमेंट. Okay, because this whole act comes under Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Understand? The application shall include among others information as required under the guidelines. Now, all guidelines related to critical wildlife habitats given by Ministry of Environment. Guidelines are given to Ministry of Environment. उस गाइडलाइंस के हिसाब से स्टेट गवर्नमेंट विल गिव अ इनिशिएशन टू मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एनवायरमेंट. जस्ट इन्फॉर्म टू मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ ट्राइबल अफेयर्स. सिंपल. इन्फॉर्म टू मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ ट्राइबल अफेयर्स. एप्लीकेशन टू मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एनवायरमेंट. हु विल डिक्लेयर फाइनल? सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट. हियर हु इज सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट? एनवायरमेंट, नॉट ट्राइबल अफेयर्स. बट द होल एक्ट कम्स अंडर मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ ट्राइबल अफेयर्स. सो बी वेरी केयरफुल विद द वर्ड्स. ओके. MCQs प्रैक्टिस करोगे तभी जाके क्लैरिटी मिलेगी. ठीक है. जस्ट प्रैक्टिसिंग ऑफ MCQs विल मेक द क्लैरिटी, बिकॉज वेरी कनेक्टिविटी है. दो मिनिस्ट्री का कनेक्टिविटी है. सो आई टोल्ड यू नाउ देयर इज अ क्लैश, राइट? सेम थिंग इज रिटन. Critical wildlife habitats and rights of forest dwellers. If a forest dweller or if a tribe, scheduled tribe is staying in an area and that area is called from today or declared as a critical wildlife areas, तो फिर खत्म हो गया ना बात. So the rights of the forest dwellers is a key issue related to critical wildlife habitats, mainly because they are envisaged as totally inviolate areas. You can't enter there. Before a critical wildlife, so what is the solution? What happens is, what they do is, there is an ambiguity. There is an ambiguity in same law. Okay. Now the thing is, before a critical wildlife area is notified, not only do the rights of tribals and forest dwellers have to be settled, but also scientific evidence has to be provided to establish that people's presence would adversely affect the wildlife in that area. It means before It means before a critically wildlife area is notified, what they do is they will check whether any forest dwellers are there or not. If there, so they will try to solve that issue. Maybe they'll do the rehabilitation, they'll do everything, and they'll also check that area proper evidence has to be provided. Proper evidence has to be provided to establish that people's presence will affect the wildlife in that area. You have to prove it. If people go and stay there, it will affect the wildlife. You have to prove through scientific evidence. Understood? So the consent of the affected Gram Sabha is also required. This is extra point. The consent of the affected Gram Sabha is also required for creating these inviolate areas or critical wildlife habitats. Prelims point. तो जहाँ पे भी आप critical wildlife areas का declare कर रहे हो, there you have to take the consent of Gram Sabha. So Gram Sabha का role is also here, both in critical wildlife areas, habitats, and also starting initiation. ठीक है? Okay. So habitat rights, FRA Act. Nodal ministry, Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Critical wildlife habitats, FRA Act. Nodal ministry, Ministry of Environment. So this way you have to cover. Okay. For the first time in India in 2016, Baigas tribe, PVTGA, particularly vulnerable tribal group, declared under Ministry of Home Affairs. So Baigas have been given habitat rights. It was the first community, Baigas जो community है, to get habitat rights. पहला community है to get habitat rights. Now this tribe is spread in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. Very famous tribe है. Okay. Some more extra points will cover here only. FRA Act का. Okay, so forest rights are some extra points. So here legal recognition, ठीक है, legal recognition है. Now why it came? Because they were kept deprived of their basic fundamental legal rights due to draconian provisions of British Forest Acts. So British Forest Acts में they were not given that legal recognition, and it took long years. 2006 में finally the government gave that legal recognition. The act also aims to shift away from the excess state control of the forest, which were kept away from the purview of public discourse and discussion. So this democratizes and gives respectful recognition to the tribal identity को एक recognition देता है. This is also a part of democracy. They are also a part of democracy, right? So it was very imperative for the government to recognize those rights, and it took long years. 2006 में finally हुआ. The aim is also for empowering and encouraging local self-governance among the marginalized tribal communities and forest dwellers. So it is also part of local self-governance because Gram Sabha is also a part. Okay. Conservation of traditional knowledge and the intellectual property rights related to cultural diversity and biodiversity of the inhabitants of the forest. Yes, because it also recognizes forest produce, right? In making a minor forest produce, they may use their traditional knowledge. Okay, traditional knowledge they use, and this traditional knowledge you can link with biopiracy, you can link with Biodiversity Act, which I have already covered. Okay, so all these things are written. Okay, who is a forest dweller and who gets the rights? Same thing. In order to enjoy the privileges and rights laid down in the act, it is important to be categorized as a forest dweller, because the rights are of forest dweller. You have to be a forest dweller first. So there are two important stages for the determination of the definition. The first stage involves conditions which are supposed to be stated to be qualify as a forest dweller. You need to qualify that condition. The person should be inhabiting forests or forest lands, means you have to stay there first. The person should be a bona fide dependent on forest. Bona fide dependent means you are dependent for your livelihood. Mentioned now, just discussed, right? You have to depend on the, you should be mandatory, you should depend on the forest, its land and resources for your livelihood. These are all mandatory provisions. Remember, these are all mandatory provisions. Okay. The second stage, तो ये हो गया first stage. Okay. Second stage, it stipulates that these conditions of stage 1 need to be true for, those conditions has to be true for, तो एक time limit भी है 75 years, a period which will deem a person as an other traditional forest dweller. टू है, एक है फॉरेस्ट ड्वेलर, एक है अदर फॉरेस्ट ड्वेलर. फॉरेस्ट ड्वेलर के लिए आपको वहां पर रहना पड़ेगा एंड यू हैव टू बी डिपेंडेंट. अदर फॉरेस्ट ड्वेलर के लिए आपको 75 ईयर्स रहना पड़ेगा टाइम पीरियड. ओके. टू फर्दर ऑल्टरनेटिव्स आर इंस्टेंट अंडर दिस एक्ट. क्या है? सेक्शन 2C ऑफ द एक्ट व्हिच प्रोवाइड्स दैट अ पर्सन इज अ मेंबर ऑफ द, you have to be a member of the scheduled tribe. This is also required. The act also provides that the person is a resident of an area where they are scheduled. ठीक है? So these are the conditions, just you need to remember. These are the conditions which you need to remember. राघवेंद्र क्या हुआ? Next. What kind of rights do forest dwellers get under this act? Covered now. Land rights. क्या? First is land rights. Okay. According to section this and this of the act, a date has been affixed for determining whether the rights to land which has not been cultivated before and after 2005. No need to remember this. As long as the land that is being cultivated by themselves for their livelihood, but whose documents are not available at the claimant's disposal, and minimum of can be claimed. So that land is being cultivated by themselves for their livelihood, number one. And suppose you do not have the documents. So how much can you claim? Minimum 4 hectares. Okay. Now see the term minimum of 4 hectares. Not only 4 hectares, minimum of 4 hectares. They can write in minimum, they'll write maximum. Again it will be wrong. Minimum of 4 hectares. If the land of the claimant has been illegally occupied by the forest department अगर illegally occupy किया है or is subject to forest revenue department's dispute, he or she can still claim those land rights on presentation of a paper, पट्टा बोलते हैं ना, और government lease. Minimum display minimum 400 can be claimed. हाँ? PDF में मैक्सिमम लिखा है, तो मिनिमम कर दो उसको. ओके. So as per this, if the land, suppose if a land is claimed has been illegally occupied, suppose एक land illegally occupy किया है गवर्नमेंट ने, फॉरेस्ट डिपार्टमेंट ने, और सपोज दैट लैंड कहीं ना कहीं डिस्प्यूट में भी है, गवर्नमेंट इज ऑल्सो ए पार्टी, सो स्टिल यू कैन क्लेम ऑन गिविंग अ गवर्नमेंट योर record. The act also provides for the protection of the land in a way that permits the selling or transfer to anyone except through inheritance. Inheritance से वो जा सकता है, just through inheritance से जा सकता है, except through inheritance. Okay. Usage. Usage we know, these are the, you can use rights. Usage means use rights. Forest produce, minor forest produce, it is recognizing. तेंदु पट्टा, all these things, तेंदुआ leaves जो होता है ना, all these things. protection and conservation rights. Right and power for the conservation and protection of the community forest. You can manage, you can conserve. ठीक है? All these things are mentioned. We have discussed. Gram Sabha, all these things, taluka level, district level. Remember, at 2 levels it is done. Only 2 levels, the process. तालुका लेवल, डिस्ट्रिक्ट लेवल पे फाइनल हो जाता है. ओके, so the power of making the final decision has been vested to the district level committee. In the committee, government people will be there and elected of that local body. 3 people, 3 government and 3 elected will be there. ठीक है, covered. Okay. So the land which is sanctioned cannot be sold or transferred. Already discussed. Okay, so we are done with the FRA Act. So FRA Act full is done. So any question from FRA Act you can solve. Any question from FRA Act, easy or difficult. Okay. So because we are studying about minor forest produce, we'll cover something related to minor forest produce. Okay. So recently what happened is, we have something called MSP, right? MSP पता है ना सबको? Minimum support price. For how many crops it is there? 23 crops it is there. For 23 crops it is there. Now similarly we have MSP for MFP. We have now MSP is for 23 crops. It is an economy topic. Now it is recommended by whom? CSEP. It is recommended. I am not using any other term. Recommended by CSEP, Commission on Agricultural Cost and Prices. ठीक है, स्टैट्यूटरी बॉडी है, ये रेकमेंड करेगा. हु डज द अप्रूवल? कैबिनेट कमिटी ऑन इकोनॉमिक अफेयर्स. कैबिनेट कमिटी ऑन इकोनॉमिक अफेयर्स. विल अप्रूव. देयर आर टोटल 8 कैबिनेट कमिटीज. पॉलिटी का चैप्टर है, 8 कैबिनेट कमिटीज. कैबिनेट कमिटी ऑन इकोनॉमिक अफेयर्स, कैबिनेट कमिटी ऑन political affairs, cabinet committee on accommodation, okay, cabinet committee on security, cabinet committee on skill का भी आ गया है. so you have to cover polity chapter में 2 pages का एक chapter है. ठीक है. so similarly MSP, we have a different MSP only for minor forest produce के लिए भी MSP है. ठीक है. so the government raises the MSP for MFP of 49 items in view of circumstances arising out of COVID-19. MSP थोड़ा बढ़ा दिया, which is a good thing. MSP means the minimum support they will get, the minimum price they will get, the minimum price they can sell. In if any harsh condition happens, that is the minimum price they will get. A kind of एक stability मिलती है. Okay. Now this is a scheme. Minimum support price for minor forest produce. It is done by Ministry of Tribal Affairs. यहाँ पे Ministry of Agriculture, CSEP मत करना. CSEP is for other 23 crops. MSP for minor forest produce is issued by Ministry of Tribal Affairs. So the order issued by Ministry of Tribal Affairs states that MSP of MFPs is revised once in every 3 years. These are all government site. You have to remember this. Once in every 3 years. By the pricing cell. by the pricing cell constituted by the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. तो Ministry of Tribal Affairs ने एक cell means what kind of office? They deal with this MSP of MFPs. ठीक है? MFP pricing cell under Ministry of Tribal Affairs. So this is the scheme. The scheme name is the scheme name is Mechanism for Marketing of MFP through MSP, Minimum Support Price. This is a centrally sponsored scheme. Remember, centrally sponsored scheme. Scheme का नाम क्या है? Mechanism for Marketing of MFP through MSP, Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Okay, Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Some names of minor forest produce. In Indian Forest Act, we covered names of forest produce. So here I have covered some names of minor forest produce. So that those kind of questions, which of the following are forest produce, which of the following are minor forest produce, those kind of question can be solved. Now lot of names are there, but you need to remember those which I tell. Those have potential chances in being asked in paper. All questions will not be asked. Anything which you can't pronounce, they will not be asked. Which the question maker खुद can't pronounce. ठीक है? पहले टैमरिंड कम का रहा नहीं चाहिए. कारंज सीड लिखो, चाहिए ये. कारंज सीड, महुआ सीड, दीज आर इंपॉर्टेंट, दे मैं आस्क्ड इन पेपर. ठीक है? कारंज सीड, महुआ सीड, साल सीड, सब माइनर फॉरेस्ट प्रोड्यूस. ऐसे क्यों मुंह बना रहे हो? मैं थोड़ी तुमको बोल रहा हूँ खरीद के घर ले जाओ, पेपर के लिए पढ़ो. साल लीव्स. ओके. चिरौंजी पोर्ट्स नहीं चाहिए वैसे. नीम सीड्स. Neem seeds is important. Neem seeds, महुआ फ्लावर्स, यहाँ पे भी लिखा है ड्राइड महुआ फ्लावर्स. ड्राइड आंवला पल्प. आंवला खाते हो ना सब? आंवला क्या बोलते हैं तेलुगु में? उसिरी गाई. क्या लिटरेचर है? उसिरी गाई काय, उसिरी काय. मराठी मिक्स है क्या तेलुगु में? काय भी बोलते हैं ना वहाँ पे. तेज पत्ता, तेज पत्ता लिखो. खाते हो ना डेली, फीवर जब होता है. तेज पत्ता. हाँ, तेज पत्ता क्या? अरे वो तेज पत्ता. डॉक्टर कौन है यहाँ पे? तुम डॉक्टर हो ना? तेज पत्ता होता है ना, वो फीवर में करते, बचपन में हम करते थे. चनौती सीड्स लिखो. चनौती सीड्स, CHONOTHI, चनौती सीड्स. हाँ, बैम्बू नहीं है. तुमको बैम्बू पसंद है क्या? बनाते हो क्या? काली हरी नॉट रिक्वायर्ड. ओके, राइट दिस वन. अपांग प्लांट, APANG, अपांग प्लांट. चनौती सीड्स लिखा. this much is enough. Okay, now some points. So this MSP revision कब होता है? 3 years में होता है, तो ये रहेगा अभी mostly this till this year or next year. So it will be in operative till further revision. MSP declared by government with reference to MSP declared by government shall be reference MSP for fixing MSP, and state government shall have latitude of 10% of MSP declared by government. That is meaning है state can fix MSP up to 10% higher or lower than MSP declared by central government. लिखो ये point. First of all, it is declared by Ministry of Tribal Affairs. एक MSP हो गया, उसका 10% lower और higher का latitude किसके पास है? State government has power. They will put state government has no power. It has power. Now, if a state suppose fixes the MSP 10% higher, MSP higher than the MSP declared by the government of India, okay, as mentioned above, and the sell price or the proceeds falls below that, then the difference between the state MSP and the central MSP will be borne by the state government only. They will write it will be shared by the center and states. Why? Because the scheme is a centrally sponsored scheme. You may think centrally sponsored scheme में क्या होता है? Everything is shared, the funding is shared. But here it is different. अगर वो price higher है and the proceeds falls below that, then जो difference है that will be given borne by the state government only. These are all prelim stuff, remember. Understood? Okay. Here TriFed will keep a watch on market prices. कितना prices क्या हो रहा है? What is TriFed now? What is TriFed? आदि बहुत सब न्यूज में रहता है, राइट, हमेशा. ट्राइफेड लिखो. TriFed established in 1987 under the Multi-State Cooperative Societies Act of 1984. Go to my cooperatives class, it's there in YouTube. I have told about this also. Cooperatives pe I've taken a special class on cooperatives. You can go through that video. There it is mentioned, this act. So TriFed is a national level cooperative body under the administrative control under whom? तब Ministry of Welfare था. Today it is Tribal Affairs. Okay. वो क्या करता है? Institutionalize करता है the trade of minor forest produce, कि how the minor forest produce should be sold. अच्छे से rationalize करता है. Market price देखेगा, it will see the price and surplus agricultural produce collected by them, cultivated by them. Okay, basically socio-economic development of tribal people in the country का काम करता है TriFed. Okay. Now here you have to remember one more thing. वन धन न्यूज में रहता है हमेशा. वन धन योजना ट्राइफेड का MSP फॉर MSP, ये सब रिलेटेड है. ओके, इट सीज द प्राइसेस, मार्केट प्राइसेस चेक करता है. वैसे तो सोसाइटी है.